Um, so I think it's about time. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Morning and welcome to ISM-INDIA webinar series. And this is part of something that we've been trying to do for the last year or so. Each month we have a series of presenters talk to you about relevant topics that can be useful to you in your daily work, as well as improving your knowledge about the function. So this month I will be talking about the various processes and a little bit about technology that supports some of these processes within procurement. And this is going to be a very I wouldn't call it a very basic webinar, but this is the information. It mostly will be an information basis. It won't be highly strategic in nature. And as I'm sure some of you already would know all the underlying processes, but this is a little bit of a closer look to see if this is what you have in your system. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Ram Raghuraman. I'm based in Chennai. I'm the director of ISM-INDIA. And, in addition, I'm also the founder of a procurement advisory company called BQ Global Solutions. We provide expertise in procurement to companies across the world. Some of the subjects that I'm passionate about are analytics in procurement, strategic sourcing, use of technology in procurement, as well as managing risk. A little bit about what I've done in the past. I am originally from India, but I went to the US to study. I got my MBA from the US, and then I proceeded to work there for some time in a variety of roles in consulting as well as in manufacturing. Thanks to my the diverse roles, I've been exposed to all the aspects of procurement and supply management. In fact, I was managing categories, I was in a global sourcing role, I was in a buyer at one of the plants, and then I was also involved in transportation sourcing, 3PL and warehousing. So it has given me a good perspective about procurement and supply in general. And currently, in addition to BCube, I also do a lot of training sessions for ISM and also in speak in conferences and so on about procurement. I'm also CPSM certified, as some of you may be as well. I encourage you, those of you that are not CPSM certified, to give it a shot. It's not only purely from a knowledge perspective, but it can also provide the leverage for you to get ahead in your career, because CPSM is highly valued in our profession. So moving on, here's what we will be doing over the next hour or so. Initially, I will set the stage. I'll talk about the various processes within procurement. This will be a bird's eye view. And then we will take a closer look into the two major subcategories. One is the source to contract, which consists of the analytics, the sourcing, execution, and contract management. We will then move on to the procure to pay. This is also something that you may know. It contains the requisition, the purchase, and the payment processes. And then we will take a look at some of the technology solutions that are available in procurement, and also some of the factors that we need to understand while making decisions on technology. I'll introduce a few players, and some of you might already know this, but I'll talk about a few key solution providers in each segment. And then to close with, we will do a quick recap. And since this is going to be a very, I have a feeling this might be a very short session. So at the end, perhaps if we have time, we can indulge in a little bit of dialogue. So if you have any questions or any comments as such about procurement processes, I encourage you to raise your hand so we can give you the opportunity to share your comments. And also, while during the course of the webinar, if you have any questions, please feel free to type in your questions as you did when I asked you if you could hear me. So I hope we're all set. So let's jump headlong into the content. So before we talk about the various processes within procurement, I think it's important to appreciate processes and why we need it. I think one thing that I always say to people is, processes are like spouses. You can't live with them, and you can't live without them too. So it is what it is. It's a fully functioning and a sound process framework is typically behind a very successful procurement function. You should have sound process framework. There are numerous benefits to having processes. One is they help improve your efficiency. So once you're able to understand your company strategy, the business strategy, and once you're able to align your operations to your strategy, and processes help you do that, you also be more efficient because you prevent duplication of effort and you become more functional at what you do. Processes also provide a bit of control and consistency, and we call it standardization. So it removes any uncertainty that you may have, and you get a fairly repeatable set of flow. It helps in improving your compliance. Not only are you preventing any unethical practices, but you also ensure that people are following what they set out to do. So it helps in improving your compliance. And ultimately, integration or communication. I think a sound process helps in better flow within the company. You're able to work better with your teams. And so what do you do in order to get these processes? I think this is very important, even if you're just in the starting out phase, if you're trying to establish processes or you're a mature organization. What you always need to do is try to audit your processes to make sure they are functioning as you had originally imagined them to be. This is critical. So I think every organization should invest time and resources to constantly improve processes in at least the critical areas, if not everywhere. And one more thing that is important, I'll talk about this later as well, is it is important to frame your functional roles and daily responsibilities around these various process flows that we'll be talking about. I think most organizations don't get this right. They might have a good process, but if the roles and responsibilities are not aligned to these processes, it might help. It doesn't really help. It can hinder a smooth function. So, moving on. So, within the procurement lifecycle, basically there are different people will call it different, but I have 6 processes under which there are several sub-processes. But the 2 major categories of processes are what we call source to contract and procure to pay. Source to contract consists of spend analysis. Note that we will be taking a little bit of a closer look into each of these processes, sub-processes in the coming slides. But the source to contract starts with spend analysis, where you create categories, you look at your accounts payable data, and you create what is called the spend queue. You understand where your money is going, basically. The next is what we call the strategic sourcing, where you identify projects and you initiate sourcing events, you build a supplier network, and you encourage suppliers to participate in a bidding process. And once the bidding process is done, the next aspect of this is your contract management, where you negotiate and execute contracts, as well as you maintain you create a repository so you understand when contracts are expiring and then ensure compliance of your contracts. So these three are the main sub-processes within the source to contract. And the next aspect, once you have these contracts, the next aspect, so these are what we call strategic procurement. These three are typically the roles that you will find in strategic procurement. And in case, if you would like to tie this to a particular role within your organization, typically this is performed by analysts. We have analysts that support the analysis of data. We have category managers that are responsible for all three, that will manage all the various categories. We also have contract analysts that will do that will focus only on contracts. So you have global sourcing experts that will also take a look at performing the sourcing events. So these are some of the roles that are created around the strategic procurement space. Moving on, once we have a functioning contract, the next phase is the requisition to pay or the procure to pay, whichever they are used interchangeably. The requisition phase starts with basically the creation of a requisition in your system, which then comes on to purchasing, where it goes through the process of initiating a purchase order, coordinating delivery, and ultimately leads to payment. And these three sub processes is what we call purchasing largely. The first three, that is spend analysis, strategic sourcing, and contract management, are called procurement, strategic procurement, and requisitions, purchasing, and payment are called purchasing or tactical purchasing. So we will be taking a closer look into all these 6 sub-processes in the coming slides. As I mentioned, the first step is spend analysis, and for those of you that have attended my webinars previously, we've had a full-length webinar on spend analysis as well, but I'll try to compress that information into one slide. Spend analysis is the first step in the procurement processes, and it's important because you have to understand what you're spending before you can really become effective. Unless you know, and what is important when you do that is the spend cube, and this is a rough model which you can try to implement in your organizations, which is, when you look at your spend data, there are 3 things that you have to understand for this. Who are you buying from? Who are you buying for? And what you're buying. So the what is actually more an understanding into the category in which you're buying. For who is more of the cost center. If you have multiple cost centers within your organization, you should know which cost center you're buying for. And from who is the look at your suppliers or vendors. And this is something that you should look at implementing in your organizations. Why is spend analysis? What does it help you do? One, as I mentioned, it increases the visibility of your visibility into what is being spent within your organization. Number 2, it helps you unlock savings. A spend analysis exercise will immediately, even prior to performing any sourcing events, it can generate savings. Once you have factual information, it's easier to make decisions based on facts rather than your gut feel. Spend analysis helps you do that. And it also helps you, as I mentioned, understand opportunities that may exist for you to perform strategic sourcing initiatives. You will be able to benchmark your spend with other organizations or even other categories within your organization to see if there are any opportunities for you to get into a better cost structure within your category. So spend analysis helps you do that. And the process of spend analysis is pretty simple. Typically, the 95% of the data for spend analysis comes from your accounts payable. So either accounts payable or P cards. It can be a whole bunch of. So the process is, once you have mechanisms to extract the data out of your system, it can be through external tools, or you can do this yourselves on Excel. So once you get the extract the spend information from your system, you do a rough pass on error correction. There might be duplicate data. Your data might need enriching. So do a rough cleanup of your data, and then the next phase is where you classify your spend into multiple categories and subcategories. And there are pre-existing categories and subcategories set up per industry. Predominantly, what every organization uses is the UN SPSE code set, which was in fact initiated by Krishan Batra, who is the president and CEO of ISM-INDIA. He was, in his previous role, he was with United Nations Development Program, and he initiated this whole process of developing a code set so organizations across the world could benefit from the coding of classification or hierarchy of categories. Do give it, I think there is a free download available for most people, so you can go check it out if you're interested in classifying your spend data. The next, once you classify this, is the actual analysis phase, where you slice and dice your data in multiple ways. I think there can be at least hundreds of ways of looking at your data from multiple angles. And in fact, at BCube we have about 20 templates of spend analysis that can generate a source. So there are multiple. The universe is wide in terms of analysis. There is literally no limit on what you can do once you have the data. And ultimately, once you're able to analyze and derive intelligence, it's, as I talked before, it's this process of decision making. It can lead to sourcing events. It can lead to negotiations with your existing suppliers. It can be consolidation of suppliers. So there are multiple opportunities once you're able to analyze the data and understand what it tells you. So once you perform spend analysis, what is the next process in the S to C that you move on to? This is the strategic sourcing step, or just the sourcing initiative. Strategic sourcing, I think in the past, has been defined to include spend analysis as well, but it's just a nomenclature. So what is strategic sourcing? It's a systematic process that helps you source effectively from suppliers. So step one, and this can be tied to the spend analysis as well, is you create category profiles. Understand what is being purchased in each category, and this is after you've set the category limits and the category hierarchies. And what is also important is, based on what category you're purchasing, you have to select an appropriate sourcing strategy. Categories are inherently different. What might work for one category will not work for the other. So when I say sourcing strategy, it can be leveraging, or it can be consolidation, and so on. The next step is perform an analysis of the supply market. You understand the supplier universe, find out what the cost levers are, what are the various dynamics that control the supply market, who the major players are, what the substitutes are. I think if you've heard of Porter's analysis, that can be a good, effective tool to perform supply market analysis. If you don't know what Porter's 5-force analysis is, just Google it, and it can provide you a good template for you to analyze the supply market. Once you're done with the analysis of supply market, the end result is that you build supplier lists or potential suppliers that can provide that can potentially be a supplier to you. Sorry. Once you have that, the next step is the actual sourcing execution, which is where you identify projects and you include suppliers, and you indulge in a bidding process where you have either an RFP or an auction. That is again based on your sourcing strategy and the category that you're sourcing. And the next step is again, we will be talking about this later as well, where the onboarding, which includes the contract, but that is again, so there is a bit of overlap between this and the next one as well. So the supplier onboarding process is where you, assuming you choose a new supplier, you negotiate, you select a new supplier, and then you create a transition plan from your old supplier to a new supplier and integrate the new supplier into your system. If the result of your strategic sourcing initiative is just a renegotiation with your existing supplier, then it works best. You just it almost circumvents this step. It doesn't add any complexity to the strategic sourcing exercise. And ultimately, once you have a supplier on board, this is a huge area by itself, where you try and understand how each supplier is performing over the course of, in continuity exactly, not over a course of a year or 2 years, but this is a continuum. So you have to have a methodology to identify metrics and how they come up together to give you a score. So tracking supplier performance is paramount, because not only does it help you analyze which suppliers are performing better, it also gives you an opportunity to provide feedback to the supplier to say, hey, you're doing well in these areas, but you're not doing so well in this. So a supplier performance methodology should track at a minimum quality, delivery, cost, operations, and innovation, as well as customer service. So, but this is a huge area by itself. I think maybe I have done a webinar in the past, or maybe I might do one later in the future. And to round up the sourcing phases, the steps, I think the next step is the continuous improvement phase, where again you constantly analyze whether you're purchasing or procuring items at the best value to your organization. You understand and reinitiate these sourcing events, and all these category profiles that you create here in step 1, as well as supply market, these constantly change as well. So you have to stay on top of these and track these changes as they occur. So that will bring that will complete this strategic sourcing loop, and then going back to the S to C process, we'll then move on to the contract management sub-process. Typically, the contract management is undervalued, but it is quite an important area. It can not only act as a trigger for sourcing initiatives, but it can also provide, be a source for savings. And what does contract management entail? It involves the negotiation process, which we discussed earlier. And in fact, there is, I've done a webinar on negotiation, or was it Christian? There is a webinar done by ISM on negotiation skills and what are the various strategies you can adopt while negotiation. It is a pretty interesting and a fascinating aspect, because negotiation is one of the key skills in our profession. we need to learn to be prepared for each negotiation and stay on top of it, so we're able to unlock the best value. So, and the critical thing that while negotiating is, especially it's true now that we're facing a somewhat difficult external environment, is try to be creative in terms of the various clauses that you can come up with in the negotiation, and see, indulge in an open dialogue with your supplier and to see what really are his factors or constraints, and try to see if you can work around a solution that is mutually beneficial to both. So don't rely on existing templates, try to be creative. So once you're able to negotiate, then it's a straightforward process of executing the contract. The next phase is where, and this is an important thing, and there are tools that help you do this as well, but you can do this pretty easily, is have a central repository of the various contracts within your organization. I think this is very important, because not only do you understand which contracts are expiring when, but once you have a repository, it becomes easy for you to do the next step as well, which is compliance, to match your spend data to what you're purchasing with pre-existing contracts to check for compliance. Compliance is again, like I mentioned, a good area for cost savings. You can invest some time and resources to check for compliance, and oftentimes these return at least, I don't want to put a number to it, but they can generate a significant savings, especially in times such as these, where we're under increasing pressure to deliver savings. So compliance can provide that fillip, and compliance typically just involves matching your existing contracts to the spend data to see if there are any anomalies, and if all the purchases that you've made are as governed by the contract. So this brings us to the end of the S2C process as we look again. So this is, we've completed this three. We've talked about spend analysis, we've talked about the sourcing execution, we've talked about contract management. And the next phase is what we call tactical purchasing, and this involves the requisitions, purchasing, and payment. So some of the roles associated with tactical purchasing are buyers, planners, schedulers, even accounts payable it's not typically part of purchasing, but it's from accounting. So typically you will have buyers, planners, and schedulers that work closely with in-plant operations, and they are responsible for the tactical purchasing side, which is the R2P, the P2P process. And what does this process? This is a fairly simple process, so I'll just rush through this, and you may already know most of this. Is step one is building a catalog or a cart. So this is similar to the contract repository, but this is more in terms of the actual product. You build a catalog or a shopping cart of sorts, like what you see in Amazon. This basically simplifies the process of communicating the existing contracts to the rest of your organization. So users will be able to add items to their cart, and once they already do this, this will raise a requisition, because the requisition is important before you enter a purchase order in your system, because requisition is what identifies the need for the actual item. Otherwise, purchasing will more likely bring a lot of items into the organization. So the important thing, the important link that a requisition does is it links a particular purchase order to an area of need. And Once the requisition is created, that is depending on how your company is set up in terms of who can raise requisition and whatnot. A requisition is raised in the system and it flows within the system through an approval process. So this is the third phase of the requisition, where based on the hierarchy that exists or the approval process within your organization, these requisitions become approved. After approval, these flow into purchasing. So once with an approved requisition number is when typically buyers are able to raise purchase orders. And there are two things here. One is if there is a pre-identified contract with a particular requisition SKU, it becomes easy to raise a PO. But in the absence of a particular contract, what the buyer then does is what we call spot buy. It's a small sourcing event of sorts, where you identify pre-existing suppliers that you have relationships with, and then you just go out to market, do a quick RFQ on an RFP, and then you get the quotes back, and then so this is what we call spot buy, or buying in the spot market. Once the purchasing order is raised, the next step is to plan for receipt, and the receiving process involves quality control, a quality check, and whatnot. So the goods or services are received by your organization, and once these have a receipt number, then it moves on to the payment stage, where an invoice is raised. So this is the first step of the payment phase. So we looked at the procure to pay phase, where the initial phase is the requisition raising phase. That is, if I just move back, the requisition ends here. The next is the purchasing phase, where you create PO and then you take it till the receipt of goods or services, and then it flows to the payment phase, where you either receive invoices online or whichever way, and then it's a simple process of reconciliation, or a three-way matching is what they call, where you match the receipt number, the PO number, and the invoice number before payment is actually authorized. So it can be either released instantly or scheduled based on the payment terms that you have with the supplier. So this is a very fairly straightforward process, and this is what we call the tactical purchasing, because it's very transactional in nature. The strategic procurement is where a lot of uncertainty and a lot of strategizing exists. So these are roughly the two main processes that govern our procurement and supply management universe. So let me just quickly check how we're doing on time. Wonderful. So it gives me a good 5 minutes or 10 minutes to talk about technology. When it comes to technology, in order to help you be more efficient at what you do at your daily role, there are a wide variety of solutions available. I think the important thing is to choose the right one that fits what you're trying to achieve, and it also fits with your organization in terms of the size, the maturity of processes, and also the number of employees that you have. So there are enterprise tools available that cover end-to-end, not just procurement, but the entire life cycle of your organization. We can call them, so where a lot of uncertainty is in between these enterprise tools and these specialized lightweight tools, because increasingly what we're seeing is nobody wants to be called an enterprise tool anymore. They all want to be lightweight. When I say lightweight, it means it's easier to implement, the cost is much lower. So increasingly these enterprise tools are also trying to minimize the implementation time. So there are a lot of players between these two that are either a full-fledged enterprise tool provider, or they can provide a whole variety of lightweight tools that cover most of the procurement process. So this is important to understand the distinction between these two grades of technology providers. And then what can set apart a specialized tool provider is they will more often than not focus on an independent process within the procurement lifecycle. So they can be either purely focusing on spend analysis, they can have a tool purely to execute sourcing events, and they can be a tool purely to help you with contracts. And the third aspect of technology solution, I wouldn't call it a technology solution, but it's a solution nevertheless, is where it's done as a service. So this is the outsourced model where you run your system, you have service providers that do these functions for you. They have their own existing toolkits and their frameworks and the methodologies. They will provide the actual outputs to you on a regular basis. So this can be a good area as well as you're considering technology solutions. So let's. I'm going to talk. There are, several tens of hundreds of people that are in this space. So I'm just going to list out a few key providers in each category, and please do note that I'm in no way favoring one over the other. This is just an information exercise. I may list or I may miss out a few. Please don't keep this in mind. So the enterprise tools, the popular ones, as you already know, are Ariba, which recently got acquired by SAP. We have Oracle Fusion, we have Bravo and Zycus and Coupa. So these are all enterprise tools that perform, that help you with the entire procurement life cycle. And in fact, SAP and Oracle are the next step in terms of they are enterprise tools organization-wide, not just procurement-wide as well. Some of the specialized tools are, you have iValua or iProcurement. Both these, in fact, do most of what, they cover most of the procurement life cycle. So iValua, iProcurement, there is Scout RFP, which helps you conduct sourcing events. There is SciQuest, which is a spend analytics tool, and there are lots of others. And when you come to service providers, these are mostly organizations that have a BPO set up. Everybody is into procurement services these days. So Accenture, KPMG, Wipro, Infosys, HCL, all these providers have procurement services. This is something that is vital as you're looking to implement a technology solution within your organization, is how do these compare between each other in terms of cost, implementation complexity, the comprehensiveness or the effectiveness of the solution, and the integration. So this is a comparison table, and these may differ based on the industry that you're in and the type of organization and the maturity of processes, but largely this is when you look at costs. So one is where it is undesirable, and 5 stars is where it's highly desirable. So enterprise tools are typically very expensive, so they don't score very well on the cost aspect. So the cost, when I say cost, it refers to the total cost of implementing the solution. You also have specialized tools that come in at a good cost rating, and the services, of course, are they're probably the best in terms of cost performance, of total cost of solution. And the increasingly, what I've noted is that people in this area, the specialized tools area, they are being very aggressive with their pricing. So increasingly they are making their tools very affordable. So the 3 stars can almost be 3.5 to 4 stars as well. When you look at compare these 3 technology solutions in terms of implementation, where implementation talks about the complexity, the length and duration, the amount of time and resources required for you to commit. Again, enterprise tools don't score very well on this because typically they are characterized by extended implementation times. Specialized tools are again somewhat similar. They're between 3 to 4 stars, where within a period of a month to 3 months you can have a fully functioning solution with lightweight tools. Services are more like a plug and play. There will be a brief period of time where there is exchange of data and where you set that up, but that can go ahead in the background. So once in terms of complexity, services are not that complex. They're very straightforward. But where enterprise tools score very well, in fact, are in terms of effectiveness of solution. I think what they do well is once you implement it well, and that's important, not just a random implementation, but once you have a good implementation of an enterprise tool, you're pretty much set in terms of processes and smooth workflow and whatnot. Specialized tools, however, I think one area of a problem with specialized tools is once you have multiple light tools for each process. Let's say you have one for spend analysis, you have one for contracts, you have one for sourcing execution. It becomes very difficult for you to integrate them together. You don't want to have multiple solutions within the same organization, so that is a catch as well as you look at multiple specialized tools. And the services, of course, is they don't score very well because sometimes for certain organization it can be a long-term solution as well, but for typically as you're trying to mature as an organization and automate the process, services may not be the ideal solution. I already talked about integration. I think it's quite similar. I think with enterprise tools you're able to integrate the various processes better. With specialized tools it becomes much harder. While services are, it's easier to integrate, but it's not a more long-term solution. So we have come to the end of the presentation. I'll just do a quick recap of whatever we covered, and then we can get into a bit of dialogue about any questions you may have or any comments you'd like to share with the audience. So we talked initially about the importance of processes and what they can help you achieve. Processes are critical to an organization because they provide, they help you be more efficient, they help you standardize, they ensure compliance, and they provide for better communication within your organization. And one thing that I recommend that all of you try to do, you can do this internally as well, is to audit your processes. You have a simple methodology to do this is the as-is and to-be terminology. And once you note down the as-is process, and then the to-be process is what we've defined during the course of this webinar, you identify gaps between the two and try to work out the differences and try to be more efficient. So try to do audits. If you're not able to commit resources, use external audits. Sometimes external audits are also good because they provide a new set of eyes. And one more important aspect in this is your daily roles and responsibilities within your organization should be aligned to these processes that we're talking about. And the processes we talked about are the S2C and the P2P/R2P, which are used interchangeably. So the source to contract process involves spend analysis, strategic sourcing, execution, contract management, and the requisition to pay involves raising requisitions, purchasing, raising POs, and then payment. We took a closer look at the spend analysis, which talks about creating a spend cube within your system. There are a lot of benefits to doing spend analysis, and this is pretty much the first step of any strategic sourcing initiative. And how you go about is you extract, you enrich, you classify, you analyze, and then you decide. Moving on, there is a 5-step strategic sourcing process, which has been talked about, where you do preliminary research, you understand internally what you're buying, create category profiles, identify sourcing strategies. You look at the outside universe, you look at perform Porter's 5 forces analysis is probably a good way of doing this. You build supplier lists for suppliers that can provide certain categories, and then is the actual sourcing event. Once you've done the sourcing event, it's the onboarding of a supplier and the identification of a framework to analyze supplier performance. Ultimately, what we want is a continuous improvement process where you constantly look at updating your category strategies, you update your supply market analysis, and you use information from your supplier performance data to create new sourcing initiatives. Contract management is a good area to ensure compliance as well as savings. You build a repository of contracts, and then you ensure compliance. This completes the S2C cycle. We then look at the requisition to pay cycle, which is a pretty straightforward one, where once you have contracts, there are shopping carts and catalogs which help users raise requisitions. The requisitions go through an internal approval process, and then once they're approved, they flow on to the purchasing, where a PO is raised either within a pre-existing contract or through a spot buy exercise. And the next step in purchasing is the receipt of goods. And once they have the receipt number, they can go to the payment, where you will then tie the invoice received, the receipt number, and the PO number. And so then the payment is released. And so we took a quick look at some of the technology solutions available. There are enterprise tools and specialized lightweight tools, as well as service-based approach to technology. We looked at a few key providers of technology, and we also compared these 3 solutions in terms of cost, implementation, effectiveness, and integration. So I appreciate the time that you spent. I hope this webinar was useful to you. And in case you have any questions, or you want to take this outside of this, I'd be happy to receive phone calls or emails with your feedback. So please contact me at ram@bqglobal.com, or you can give me a call. My number is listed there. And if you have the opportunity or a chance, take a look at our website, which is www.bqglobal.com, as well as ISM-INDIA.org for more information about CPSM and other certifications and training. Thank you. What I will do now is let's